Okay, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tammy, and I'll be handling the technical aspects of today's session for our host, Kristin Minto Snowden. Before I introduce Kristin, I will briefly tell you about these sessions and how they work. These are not therapy, nor are they 12-step meetings. These sessions are informational and educational only, dealing with aspects of healing and recovery. No more, no less. The only requirement for participation is that you choose to be here. These sessions are moderated, meaning that today it's me, will be in charge of the session. Depending on the session, moderators may present information, answer questions, or simply facilitate an open-ended discussion among the session's participants. Today we are going to have a topic and then have Q&A. We cannot guarantee your privacy, nor can we guarantee confidentiality. We do, however, expect that all participants will respect the privacy and confidentiality of other participants. And we've not had an issue of this, but we would need to remove people if they're disruptive or are breaching that. Today, Kristin will be presenting on the topic of a book called Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy. And then we'll open things up for questions, although, like I said, the Q&A is open, so you can be asking questions even while she's presenting, and we'll get to them afterwards. Use that Q&A at the bottom. Your question can be asked anonymously. I don't recall exactly, but I think you have the choice of asking it anonymously. You can also set up your account as an anonymous one. If you want to connect directly to me or to Kristin, you can use the chat feature, but know that that probably won't be in the questions answered. Let's see. I think that's kind of about all we need to address right now.
Yeah, so, and I think any follow-up questions afterward, we have our email addresses.
Yes.
Yes. You can maybe type in for information.
Yes, we will definitely do that, and sexandrelationshiphealing.com, you can reach any of us if there's a question for Kristin and you forget her email address. But I will copy and paste that into the chat feature so that people have it. But you can always reach us through that because I can always forward a message to Kristin as well. So without further ado, Kristin Minto Snowden.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to just dive right in. I had a friend who recommended a book to me. It's called Option B. I think it was a New York, best-selling author. It's Sheryl Sandberg. She works at Facebook. A really quick synopsis is her husband died when they were both relatively young, and she was kind of at the height of her career. And so it's a book that she did in conjunction with Adam Grant, who is a psychologist. And it's kind of a summary of information paralleled with her story of grief and loss, trying to kind of educate people on what grief and loss is and give them frameworks to transcend it, to kind of get through it. And when I was reading through it, even though it was in the context of losing a partner, I couldn't help but think to do with the topics and things that my clients struggle with. Which is often my clients are struggling with uncovering an addiction, or being the one to have an addiction, or uncovering an infidelity, a betrayal of some kind. And what I thought would be great today is to talk about the fact that betrayal trauma leads us to a process of grief and loss. Because while maybe in Sheryl Sandberg's case, she was mourning the loss, the absence of her husband in her life, once we experience betrayal trauma and we find out that our partner has an addiction we didn't know about, that they were leading this double life, that they were lying to us, manipulating us, we grieve the loss of what we thought our partner was going to be to us. We grieve the loss of what our marriage or our relationship, what we thought that was going to be. There is an expectation of safety and commitment that is no longer there, which all contributes to the feelings of grief and loss. So I thought that book and some of the suggestions and educational pieces that they provide give a really great construct or a really great structure to understanding the betrayal trauma and the pain that one experiences in a relationship, and how to kind of transcend it and get through it. So just a few things. I'm just going to highlight a couple things for a few minutes, and then we can kind of get into the discussion. So this is just how to survive the pain of a betrayal trauma in a relationship. She defines a traumatic experience as a seismic event that shakes our belief in a just world, robbing us of the sense that life is controllable, predictable, and meaningful. And I have to say, for many of the people that are here who are experiencing pain and suffering in a relationship, would say that that kind of lays out how they're feeling in their relationship. Betrayal trauma is absolutely a traumatic experience. So this is what she's kind of saying. Those who make it through this painful, difficult experience, studies show that children and adults recover more quickly when they realize that the hardships aren't entirely their fault, that they don't affect every aspect of their life, though sometimes it feels like they do, and that this will not follow them forever. So she breaks them up into 3 different categories, saying that you cannot take these painful betrayal traumatic experiences personally. You cannot think that they are pervasive in your life and that they are not permanent in your life. And realizing that will help you transcend the experience faster, feel less depressed, and cope better in that moment. Also, we tend to overestimate, I guess studies show that we tend to overestimate how long these painful experiences are going to affect us. So do keep that in mind when you're kind of in the trenches of this pain. The other thing that she strongly encourages, she and the psychologist she co-worked this out with, is to use a couple cognitive behavioral therapy tactics of, replace the words never and always, like, I'm never going to recover from this, I'm never going to trust again, and I'm always going to distrust, I'm always going to be angry, with the words sometimes and lately. Sometimes this is going to feel extremely painful. Lately, I have had a really hard time with getting through my anger and being okay with it. I'm showing that for the person asking that question. And also kind of doing this cheerleader kind of thing, is those are my words, which is, no matter how sad I feel, no matter how deep this is in the moment, kind of reminding, because that often will trigger that fight, flight, or freeze back part of your brain, is when that, oh my gosh, I'm in so much pain, I am in so much sadness. In fact, Brene Brown was saying that when we're in extreme feelings of disconnection and extreme suffering from a betrayal trauma, it'll light up the same parts of our brain as are lit up when we are in severe physical pain. So you need to kind of talk to that back part of your brain to just remind yourself, like, no matter how bad this feels in this moment, chemicals and emotions will rise and then they will fall and you will get through it. And she gives a side note too, speaking of the whole Brene Brown thing, is that we're wired for connection. Everything in our body basically says, go out there, connect with other people, have deep talks, hugs, sex. This is good. Which also, she's basically saying, Sheryl Sandberg's saying, because we're wired to pursue connection, we're also wired to endure and make it through disconnection. So she's kind of saying we have it in us to survive this deep betrayal trauma and pain and suffering that's happening in the relationships. She also asserts that she adopted or appreciated the Buddhist theory that all of life will include suffering at some point. When you're aging, through sickness, and that loss in general is inevitable. And I think she's kind of encouraging the reader that the sooner you kind of accept that loss and pain are as much a part of your life as joy and celebration, it helps you push back on it less. I'm a huge believer that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're in deep pain, deep suffering, deep shame because your partner is cheating on you, or you uncovered an addiction, or there's severe lying or abuse going on, and you push back on like, God, I'm so stupid. How did I fall for that? And God, why don't I just leave him? And everyone says I should leave him, but I just really want to work it out. Or conversely, God, now I'm alone and I'm so scared. The more you push back on that pain and fight it versus accepting that this is extremely painful and this is horrible and I will transcend this. There will be a better day. The longer the painful process is. So just pay attention to that when you're in, it's so, these exercises sound so simple, but when you are in that deep pain, when your back of your brain is firing off saying, you are going to die, Kristen, this is so painful and so horrible. There seems like there's no hope and you're not going to survive. It's oftentimes in those moments where if we did try to get out of the relationship, we'll jump back into it, maybe if it's not the healthiest decision, because we think that we're minimizing the pain. Or sometimes it'll elongate if we stay in that relationship, the emotional fluctuating and the happiness to anger to fear to just running the gamut of severe emotional stress in those moments. So just pay attention to that. She suggests a few things to try to get through this. She personally was feeling like she had to turn towards spirituality and enhance her spiritual life, because she felt like when she was grieving the loss of somebody, when she was grieving the loss of the life that she thought she was going to have, the hopes that she had for her and her family, that a spiritual practice allowed her to feel like she's not alone. So it's in a moment of feeling deep disconnection. Spirituality can often give you that metaphorical hug that knows somebody is there. And also when all these things feel so externally out of your control in these moments of trauma, spirituality can sometimes give you internal and spiritual strength. Another thing she's a very big fan of is gratitude lists. And you'll hear this a lot. There's a lot of studies that show that practicing gratitude has a lot of positive effect on how people transcend painful situations, staying sober, maintaining joy in their life. And gratitude can be pretty simple. She broke it down to just when she was right after her partner died, just despite all the tears and sadness and this fear that she experienced daily, she would not let herself go to sleep without listing 5 things that she's grateful for. You know, that her kids are still healthy, that she still had a job, that she has other friends and family that are there to support her and love her, that she can still be present for the children. Things like that it's just a daily practice of when nothing feels like you have anything to be grateful for, that's when you need to practice gratitude the most. She also strongly encourages that you speak to healthy and safe people. Again, when we're in a state of disconnection, so we're grieving and we're in a state of loss, you need to do the countermeasure of not sitting in your sadness and isolating, but to seek out a safe community, one that won't judge you, someone that kind of can sit there with a compassionate heart and listen to you, maybe let you cry, whatever. And they're not telling you, oh, you need to get over this. This is, he was worthless. You shouldn't have stayed with him as long as you did. Those aren't safe people. It's someone that can just sit there with a capacity to let you be sad and validate your sadness. You need to acknowledge that you're in pain, that you're not crazy for being in pain, and that you need support, and that's okay. Silence, a lot of studies show that the more you isolate, the more you do not talk and process through trauma, the longer your suffering will be. It's also encouraged that sometimes it's more helpful to speak to those who have gone through what you've gone through. So seeking out people who can empathize with your situation can definitely help. Let's see. There's a couple other things, and then I'll wrap it up, which is just be kind to yourself. She says that studies show that those who have kind language and forgiveness towards themselves get through post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms or have lower instances of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And and she points that out, and also says that being in shame, so I'm bad, this happened because I fell short, because I'm wrong, that will only increase your trauma, increase the severity of your symptoms. So please pay attention to that. And self-confidence is critical, because when you are traumatized, it often leads you to doubt yourself, to doubt your instincts, to be in a state of extreme vulnerability, but one where you're questioning your value and worth. So you have to be very careful of that. She closes with sharing how there can be post-traumatic growth. So I actually think that one of the most interesting things about humanity is that our physiological bodies, our flesh and blood, our cellular level and our emotional level seems to only grow when it's in a state of extreme stress. I mean, if you look back on the things that have caused you to learn so much and become more complex and more dynamic, it usually comes from a state of suffering. And so she kind of points that out and saying that even though that this is extremely painful, there is often, when done right, an opportunity to grow, to gain an appreciation for things that you may have taken for granted up to that point, form deeper, more intimate relationships as a consequence of going through this suffering, and also seek out or determine different and new meaning in life. So sometimes it's really common for people to go through a level of suffering if they lost a partner, or went through divorce, or went through infidelity, to want to be there to support others who have gone through it, because they appreciate the nuances of what someone might be struggling with that maybe the average person wouldn't understand unless they've gone through it. And it also helps them make meaning out of what they went through. And lastly, talking about how you can see new possibilities, when you transcend through this trauma. Last thing I'll note, and I think this is important, is she says this, and it's important for you to acknowledge this as well, is that our brains, for survival reasons, obviously, are meant to point out what doesn't fit, what doesn't make sense, what's a negative thing, because, it's trying to keep us safe. And she's saying that you have to take extra attention. You have to stop and pause and really process positive, joyful moments in life, because it is actually counterintuitive for us to do that. So always make sure that you're taking the time, even when you're in your state of pain and suffering, to experience joy, to take it in, and appreciate the fact that your brain doesn't hold on to it as tightly as the negative, painful stuff. So you have to make extra effort to make that happen. And that's it.
So much good stuff. I'm a Post-it noter, so I've been doing little Post-it notes as you've been talking. But and I think of and for those of you that are participating, if you have questions, please start adding them to the Q&A. But the always and never, for someone like myself, in addiction, that was something I had to learn very early on to change, because that language made me feel, well, first of all, like if I was never going to be able to ever, use again, well, that's just horrible. And it was always going to be, so it was that dramatic thing. So finding the in-between place was really critical for me, and to understand everything is temporary. That was a really hard concept for me, but everything is temporary, the good and the bad, and to understand that, that it will survive. And, you're talking about, like I'm going to die from the pain that I'm in. And I'm, to be reminded that, I just have to endure this moment, and this too will change, that it won't always be like this. I was thinking too, when you're talking about the gratitude list, I love gratitude lists. Those have been so helpful for me. And David Fawcett did a webinar similar to this a few weeks ago, and he talked about resiliency, and that very topic came up. And, I was thinking, I can't experience the pain of loss if I haven't loved. And so it's, so yes, I can protect myself from ever experiencing this painful losing someone or a relationship or whatever, but I also wouldn't have had the joy of experiencing that. I was thinking too about when you were talking about the traumatic events. I just read the story again about how the caterpillar, transforming, and it has to come out of the cocoon. And if it doesn't do the struggle, it doesn't gain the strength, it can't survive unless it does. And I agree that I too have not learned as much when things are on the coasting, plateau, as when they're tough. It's when I've had to engage and learn and dig in and find, and refine. Actually, I always think of it as refining myself. I'm continuing to hone in on my true self. And I value that. I ultimately value that, even if in the moment I'm not loving, the painful situation. So great book. I think I'm gonna have to pick that one up. I've got the pile of reading lists, but that one, definitely seems like, like one with I love it when there's practical tools of like, okay.
Yeah. She does a good job of marrying her story and how she was trying to transcend it with, then the psychologist kind of jumps in with his study show, data shows, and it gives a good marriage between fiction and, academia world, or nonfiction and academia.
But with some concrete, write a gratitude list, speak to healthy, safe people, and I think that's why 12-step meetings are so useful. Or, we're going to create these drop-in groups. It'll be people who have lived or are living, a similar experience, that have an opportunity to connect. And I think that's, I've been in recovery for a while. I still go to 12-step meetings because I want, first of all, it's good for me. But second of all, I want people to go, hey, she made it. If she can make it, anybody can make it, but it's that kind of thing where, I have learned some tools, and I can absolutely share some things that might be useful to someone else. At the end of the day, when I leave, I know I probably will not act out that day. So it's, it's good for me to have that as well. So there is a question. It's in the chat. So it says, I get kicked out of, sounds like some people are getting kicked out of Q&A. So feel free to use the chat. I will monitor those. My SA husband recently shared his feelings with me about my inability to show him compassion, and he said it was hurtful to him. So I'm thinking what you're saying is that it's fairly early in recovery, and he's looking for you to be, and I'm making this up, so feel free to,
correct you.
to add this, but add to this. But, I'm thinking he's looking for, you're doing great, I'm so happy, all is forgiven, versus.
Well, it says they've been in recovery for 3 years.
Oh, does it say? All right.
Yeah.
Scrolling. So
he just got out of inpatient recovery treatment. So
he probably hasn't been really in recovery for 3 years if he just recently. So even if he hasn't done the acting out behaviors, there's like in AA, we talk about, there's a dry drunk, like you're hanging on by your fingernails, but you aren't actually in recovery. I look at sobriety as different from being in recovery.
Right.
So sobriety is like, I'm abstinent, I'm not, doing whatever acting out behavior. And then for me, recovery is about integrating different principles into my life. So, okay. Yep. 90 days sober, dry drunk. So yeah. So anyway, so thoughts on what she can share, or how she can talk to her husband, or maybe there's some ways that you can find, maybe there's some,
yeah, finding compassion for someone who's harmed you so much, right?
right.
That's so difficult. The two most common things is, how do I survive this? And how do I love someone again, if that's the state, if that's the plan. Gosh, it's that, I guess let's reference what Sheryl Sandberg was saying, is that you can't take this trauma personally. Oftentimes the most painful things that happen to you at the hands of other people, they're in their own darkness, and they do these things because of their own sickness, because of their own mental and emotional struggles. It's not because they woke up and they thought they'd destroy their life or destroy your life. So I'm sure it's very difficult because it has harmed your life, and it has hurt you so badly because, their choices have so painfully hurt you. But maybe you can try to separate out the two. I know that personally is such a difficult dichotomy, right? Like, our brain loves integrated things that fit all in a bento box and make sense. It is so hard for a brain to learn, this person has harmed me in the most horrible way. They have lied and hurt me and broken every promise, and I love them. And I want to support their recovery, and they want me to be compassionate towards them. You are going to have to work so hard to dig new grooves into that brain to help you learn that very difficult dichotomy. It is not easy, but sometimes if you can kind of depersonalize it and, and just realize they did these things in their own sickness and struggle.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And in separating the behavior from the person is really challenging. But there may be places where you can find compassion for, the hurting person he was, that he had to choose those behaviors. I mean, addiction at the end of the day is about escaping. It's like, I can't tolerate whatever it is, and so therefore I have to go whatever, and in particular sex addiction, because it's such an intimate thing. But sex addiction isn't really about sex. It's really about escape. So, if there's any place, any space in your mind where you can think of, this person was really hurting. I don't have to give them, an attaboy or whatever, every time he goes to a meeting or whatever. But if there's some places where, you can find that you genuine, maybe on your gratitude list, maybe you go, I'm grateful that he went to a meeting today or whatever.
Right.
If there's something, that you can genuinely feel, but, I think it's helpful for you to remind him that it was terribly painful for you, and it's going to take you way longer than 90 days to, get,
yes,
through that pain. So.
Absolutely. One other thing too is it might be interesting to explore, if you wanted to be compassionate towards him, if you thought a compassionate thought and could possibly make a gesture, I'd be curious to know if there's a voice in your head that's like, no, don't show weakness. Because it's hard to be compassionate towards someone. Like, oftentimes when we're in that state of anger of, how could you do this to me? You at least feel empowered and strong and safe. Compassion can sometimes be a very weakening emotion, where you might be afraid that you're exposing yourself to being victimized again, right? So I'd be curious for you to explore what being compassionate, what kind of acts of compassion, how your comfort level with them, if they trigger any fear inside you.
That makes perfect sense. I don't like being hurt. I'd rather be angry.
Right.
That's a much safer place.
I'm in control of my anger. If I see you as a person and I feel compassion for you, then I might not be paying attention to the red flags of you screwing up again.
Yeah. So there's a question. The death of a marriage occurs each time my addict husband doesn't stick to his recovery activities. Although he is sober, how do I find joy or want to connect with him again? So I guess I'm curious on that one. Each time he doesn't, so it feels like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, well, he's sober right now, but so perhaps you're kind of feeling like you're on the wheel of, the hamster wheel of like, well, he's sober right now, but we could fall off that any moment. So if that's the case, let me know. But, Kristen, what are you thinking with this? Although he's sober, how do I find joy and want to connect with him again?
Oh, I know. Sorry. That's just the amount of time, right? Because these people who are, our loved ones that are in recovery, again, your brain not being able to put it away into a bento box, like they are the ones that have been the source of so much pain and sadness. You're gonna kind of look at them like an alligator in your bathtub for a long time, like, are you gonna harm me or are you going to hug me? Sometimes, I've heard of just even, it's like a tone of their voice that brings them back to the memory of, oh gosh, this is how he used to talk to me when he was acting out. I think so. Then that goes back to what we've talked about in other webinars, which is EMDR, trauma treatment. When you guys have worked through the trauma and there is no longer complex trauma, meaning regular and more acting out, harming the recovery process, when that has calmed down, you might want to explore doing some EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Yeah.
It's a proven trauma technique, which actually allows you to calm down your physiological response of like I said, that alligator in the bathtub. You'd be like, oh crap, there's an alligator in my bathtub. It kind of lets you go, calm down. He's a person. He's my partner. He's, today he went to a meeting. Today he's doing his best. And it lets you kind of not forget what's happened. So it's not like it wipes your memory, but it does lower the physiological kind of PTSD. I'm back in the, in the forefront of this nightmare, and calms down that fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, and I've done that therapy before, and I agree. And it helps you look at it in a little more neutral, so you're not experiencing the the painful thing, but you can look at it without just flee. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, because that back part of your brain that tells you these people are going to cause you harm will take. It'll hijack the rest of your emotions. They're very powerful. So just pay attention to that and see if you can do some work around that.
Well, and I think even for me, a lot of validating, this is what I feel is happening. And, when I talk about it, someone can give me, and not necessarily the hubby, because, the gaslighting and all of that, but if there are safe people that I can talk about, this is what I'm experiencing, and my gut tells me this, or my head tells me this, but, what perspective are you seeing with this, and getting some of that validated, either reinforces that, I need to protect myself, or that things could be a little bit different, and there could be, an opportunity to, settle a little bit too. So, okay, next question. When it comes to sex addiction, both the hubby and I have been directed to different books and resources for our own growth. We are both taking advantage of those resources in our own therapy. Yay! However, are there suggestions that you have for activities we can do together for growth in our relationship? Helpful relationship building tools include ones that integrate our kids and bring a positive focus back to our life.
Right. I remember the story that what comes up for me is Brene Brown, when she was doing all the studying, researching about how important it is to play with the family. The process that she went through is she actually sat down with the family, and they all talked about and shared ideas as a family about what kind of environment what environment makes them feel like they're in a state of play. Whether it was board games, going on a road trip. I think for them, they ultimately decided anything that had to do with water.
Oh.
water play. So it was swimming, going to the river, doing different water activities. So I think that that's an important thing to be exploring. You know, you can kind of turn to your partner and turn to your family to determine what does actually bring joy to your life together, all of you. It might even just be watching TV, but all of you together sitting on a couch, you know, all physically close to each other. You know, I can't determine what brings joy into your life.
Yeah, I love that idea, and just the communication. And it doesn't say how old the kids are too, but you know, if the kids are old enough, they definitely have opinions of what they like to do. You know, if the little kids, it might be just going to the park. You know, so.
And an important thing that Brene Brown said about the play is you need to make sure that it's not something where it's like, dear God, let's just finish this board game and go get a glass, you know, go sit down and do something we really like doing. It has to be really actually play. True play has to be something where you're all enjoying it. And it's hard with the different ages to find something like that. But I would challenge you guys to kind of lean into each other and figure that out.
Yeah, I have my sister's family. They loved cooking together, you know, and even when the kids were little, they started, you know, chopping things and all of that, and that was great family time. So, you know, I don't cook. That wouldn't have been on my list, you know. So that would have been, dear God, get me through this. But anyway, okay. I'm 6 weeks out from D-Day, disclosure day. On average, how long does it take until I don't feel like death every day, till the marriage feels okay again? Well, that's a big question. So
I feel like I am not equipped to talk about disclosures. So if you have experience with that, then
so first of all, you know, Rob shared just on Monday night, you know, it's a year and a half before, you know, the partner starts feeling like it's all going to be okay. But it really depends on what is the addict doing? What are they doing to help make that different? So I'd invite you, first of all, connect on Rob's Monday night as well. But the marriage isn't going to feel okay again just overnight, or you're not going to wake up one morning and go, oh, it's all okay. It's going to be a process. And if the addict is doing things that help rebuild your trust, and is actively engaged in their recovery, and you're finding support outside of your relationship, with the addict, this is great. But connecting with other betrayed partners, it will start feeling better faster than if you're just constantly living in the trauma like Kristen was talking about. So hopefully that makes sense. It's going to take time. But I promise if both of you are on a recovery path, you will get there. And I know so many couples that have found not just, okay, we're okay. It's like, they're like, this is better, deeper, more, I'm more committed than the day we said I do, because the faults, when you get married, if you were young when you got married, then you're thinking it's going to be, sparkles and unicorns and rainbows all the time, and it's going to be, well, that's not life. There's, insurance to pay and garbage to take out and dishes to do and, and life and, all the things. So like when Kristen was talking about is, understanding. Yeah, in fact, I wrote down, all of life includes suffering, and I used to do the why me, and somebody looked at me in the program and said, why not you? Why would you be exempt from this? And that really helped me to understand that, like none of us, get a pass on all the suffering. But if you and your loved one are committed to recovery, it will get better. You will not feel like death every day. I encourage you to listen to some podcasts, the Betrayed Partner podcast, Michelle Mays. Lots of people are really finding that one helpful. Barbara Steffens, Hope Ray, Marnie Breeker, all of those are specifically, and there's some Q&A ones. So the podcasts are on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, but there are some other resources. Listen to them over and over again. And, just absorb that there is hope, this will get different. So the next question, if the addict...
There was one on the chat that was, okay. Well, I don't want her to have to wait much longer.
Okay. My SA husband is 5 months sober and he's happy and doing very well in recovery. A few days ago, we tried to talk to him, argue about something that bothered me unrelated to sex addiction, but he acted in an old pattern of shutting me down, not dealing with the unpleasant emotion, and the following with impersonal sex that could have been with me or anyone. I worry that he gets more comfortable and complacent. He'll start acting like a jerk again, though not necessarily having affairs. Fair point. So, thoughts?
Yeah, fair point. And I think that's an important thing. You know, it's an unpleasant feeling to think and fear that, but it's absolutely one that you should hold on to and feel validated in. I think a lot of people stay in the relationship despite the betrayal and despite the harm because they hope to have the relationship that Tammy was talking about, one that is deeper and more intimate and more real than they'd ever experienced before. And I've heard from multiple people that work in sex addiction or partners of, betrayed partners, is the number one reason why they do what they do, is because nothing feels better than helping these couples transcend all the pain, all the betrayal, but also the very maladaptive patterns, all the intimacy issues that they had from day one, that they can kind of clean up, fix, improve, and then experience a closer, more intimate, more real and vulnerable relationship than they'd ever had before. So, but it happens through moments like this, that it's, yes, the tip of the triage is like, get him to stop, hope that he is in recovery and stops doing acting out behaviors. But underneath all of that is that kind of stuff, cleaning up the the bad patterns, the unspoken resentments, the shame and hurt and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, bring it into therapy, bring it into your support group. But yeah, you got to clean that stuff up.
And I agree. And I think it is communication, and often perhaps there's an opportunity to say, what happened yesterday or whenever this was, a few days ago, I've had time to reflect on it, and I think we can do this better, and invite with solutions. So, I think it's like, I want to have a safe way that we can communicate, and it doesn't have to, like, maybe take a break, say, I can't talk about this right now, but I want to come back to this when we both have had time to reflect on it, or, whatever. So, and one of the things I thought about too, because I can tell I hang out with Rob a lot, because I'm going to keep bringing up Rob, but Rob was talking to somebody else on a webinar a few weeks ago, and you talked about impersonal sex. It's like, you don't have to have sex with somebody if you're not feeling it. Like, if this is the pattern that we have, you can say, let's have this when we can, when we are feeling connected again. So that's my thoughts. But I agree with Kristen. It's a communication thing. So.
Yeah, and it's something, again, I don't hang out with Brene Brown, but I quote her pretty often as well. But sure, if you want to hang out, Brene, let's do it. Yeah. A great tool that I like that she has is because you're very in touch. The person who brought that comment, you're in touch with it. So that's the number one issue always, is the awareness. But number two is communicating it in a non-defensive, creating way. And so the way that she kind of instructs people to broach these unpleasant or uncomfortable subjects is, when you said this or that, or reacted this or that, or you dismissed my concerns, the story I told myself is that you're going to just return to being the same old person. Maybe you won't be cheating on me, but I'm going to be miserable. And it just kind of gives you a format, a framework to kind of talk about these really uncomfortable things. When you say that, the story I tell myself in my head is this. Is that accurate? What's going on? And it can start that uncomfortable conversation.
I love that, and I had been taught to talk in feelings, so it's, so it's not arguing, I feel this, and so somebody can't deny your feelings, they can, this is what I, whatever, but with its feelings, it's like, I felt hurt or I felt unheard or whatever, and so I want to change that narrative, and I always think if I can offer a, the olive branch, so to speak. It's like, like, okay, we're two people. I want to have a conversation. Let's see what we can do to, to bridge the gap, but not be a doormat. So hopefully that helps. I love Brene Brown. So yeah, we should get Brene and Rob to do a podcast. That'd be,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Front row seat, please.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So next question is, if the addict continues along a path of dishonesty, can you heal while staying in the marriage, or does the dishonesty continue to pour salt on the wound?
Yeah, I know, right? I guess I'm just going to answer by telling the story. Yeah, I work in a treatment center still, so I was working with someone who is struggling with addiction. And she said, so I was talking about this normal relational stuff, and she's like, I have a horrible relationship. I feel like I'm emotionally abused by him. I have no self-confidence. I think I abuse prescription drugs as a consequence of all of that. And obviously in here, she's in treatment. And we talked about it further, and she said, well, what if I just feel like I'm not ready, and I'd rather have this pain of being in this relationship than the pain of being out of the relationship. And it's that really tough in-between state where it's just kind of like everything works until it doesn't work anymore. And you have to determine within your own heart and mind, is it not working anymore? If you walked away, I have another video on my YouTube, which is should I stay or go? And it's just kind of this discussion on how do you process whether this is too much, if the betrayal or the wounds or the violations I've experienced are too much to heal from it. That is something that only you can determine, and you want to make a thorough process of figuring that out, and hopefully with support of a mental health professional that works in betrayal trauma or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I agree. And like Kristen said, you are the only person that knows the nuances of your situation. I don't know if the addict is early in recovery or not ever going to get in recovery. There are things possibly to have that person go to an intensive program that might help break through some of that and get them on a different path. So if there are options for other treatment for the addict, that could potentially change things. But at the end of the day, there are people that can't or won't make the necessary changes to find a path of recovery. So, and there are people that accept that and live with that and can find a way to thrive and have joy in their life and just understand that that's a component of their loved one. So, so maybe read Prodependence, Rob's new book, because, it talks about being somebody, when things aren't going great. So maybe you'll find some help there too. There's a free podcast on that as well, but perhaps that'll be helpful. So there's no other questions. I'm going to check the chat feature, make sure I didn't miss something. Does anybody have any other questions? Or somebody made a comment. Very cool concepts to apply. This is about your presentation on the book. Very cool concepts to apply to personal and professional domains, as well as to apply to clinical work. Post-trauma growth. I do love that too, post-trauma growth, attitude of gratitude, and refining our approach to life. So great. Okay, I think we have all of the questions answered. If no, does anybody else have any? We have a few more minutes if anybody else has a question or comment.
I'll ask them unless you want to throw something in there, but let me just say that through all this pain, and this is my opinion, but I feel like the ultimate goal is to be in an intimate relationship with someone who is also willing to be equally intimate. So intimacy does not just mean, physical sex. It means the willingness to kind of show someone your good, your bad, your light, your dark, your strengths, your weaknesses, and someone willing to do the same thing. And you guys kind of love each other in spite of it, right? In fact, in spite of the fact that we're all perfectly imperfect. It takes a lot of grace. And basically, when there is still dishonesty and there's still manipulation and there's still an unwillingness to be accountable for poor choices or be accountable for maladaptive patterns, it's not going to be possible to have intimacy, and also safety. Feeling safe in a relationship is what I feel like the number one requirement to have intimacy. You don't want to put yourself out there in a vulnerable place if you don't feel safe. So when you're healing in the relationship, make sure that you and your partner are taking strides to help you feel safe, and you're helping your partner feel safe as well. It's very important.
Yeah, well, and I think, going back to the communication, it's finding a way to communicate in a safe way about what you need, and not what both of you need. You're individuals and, like warts and all, but, you're looking to find that connection, but learning to say things in a way that can be heard. My husband is not an addict. I'm the addict. And, I've had to learn, that, like you said, the story I'm telling myself, I've used that, it's like, he said that. And I was like, does that mean this? So if I can say it in a non, what way, he's, I can say, this is what I'm thinking. Is that what you meant? And it's usually completely not, but there are times when, he's missed what I said. Well, he's human and I jabber a lot. So he missed what I said, but I immediately was hurt that I'm not valued. Well, that's not the case. So I really appreciate, this was great information, so helpful. And hopefully those of you that joined us have found some interesting and useful tidbits that you can apply. We're going to post this on the site and on Kristen's YouTube, so you can find it for a short time on Sex and Relationship Healing, but for a longer time on our YouTube site. And join us is 2 weeks Halloween?
I know November 1st, I think is. Oh yeah, you're right. It is Halloween is Wednesday, right? It is. No, so I think because it's the first and third Wednesday. So
it's the first and third Wednesday. So watch the schedule. If you haven't already registered on Sex and Relationship Healing, please do so, because then you will get a notification of the different webinars, and we will be adding those drop-in groups. So I keep thinking I'm going to have it, and I'm this close. I've got a number of people that are willing to support those. So I've got the things. I have the agreement. I just need to wrap up those last little details, but then there'll be a place where you can connect with people and you'll be able to see each other. It'll be moderated, but you can talk amongst yourselves and support, you can say, hey, yeah, I went through that and here's what I did, whatever. So it'll be a great benefit to have on the site as well. So thank you all for joining us, and watch for the next time Kristen will join us.
November 7th. I looked it up.
November 7th. Okay, thanks for checking.
No problem.
And Rob's webinar will be next week, Monday, and then next week, Wednesday evening at 5:30, David Fawcett does his webinar. And if I was with him for the resiliency, it was a good one too. A lot of great points. So look at that if you missed it. It'll be on the site as well. So until next time, thank you all.
All right, thank you.